All right. Well, this is an extra tool for you this week. I've always said I would love the opportunity to have a whole life group together, middle school, life group leaders and high school life group leaders, and we get to walk through the lesson we're going to walk through, talk about it together, process through questions, make up our own questions for students, and then you get to jump into Wednesday. I mean, how cool would that be? But that's not the case, and so sometimes I really feel like I've got to do a better job of helping, particularly on weeks like this, where we're going to be talking about really applying something we've been walking through into the lives of the students, and particularly for you as high school leaders this week, you're going to be in Bible study, and that means that you get to do this. I mean, I get to set you up with a panel discussion and hopefully help kind of lead. You get to see here's where Nick wants us to head, and this is what he has in front of us, but you're doing it. And so, just briefly, because I want to get to the application piece of, I want you to hear some of these other little G gods that students struggle with and make sure you have them, at least enough to maybe go do some research on your own too. But we're going to be bouncing off the series of, 2 weeks ago, Moses didn't just need to know, about God and something to be true about God, like his self-existence, which is what distinguished him apart from all these other little G gods, but he needed to know which of the gods he was talking to. And, with the plethora of options from his Egyptian upbringing to the plethora of options within his current Midian situation and family, tribe he found himself a part of, he's like, okay, but how can I trust? Who is this God I'm talking to? And he comes to find out this is the big G God that he's talking to. And so, this week, then we go, okay, 1 Corinthians 8, 5-6, Paul's telling believers in the church of Corinth, the church in Corinth, for although there may be so-called gods, little g, in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many little g gods and many little l lords, yet for us there is one God, big G, the Father, from whom all things and for whom we exist, or all things and from whom we exist, and one Lord, big L, Jesus Christ, through whom are all things and through whom we exist. Paul is essentially saying the same thing, that these believers in Corinth have a plethora of options to choose from, and he's not simply just talking about idols, and that will come up, and let that unfold a little bit within your group. They'll talk about social media, cell phones, etc. When you ask the question that I give you here, what other lowercase g gods fight for my affections? Because they're gonna wrap in affections, and they're gonna, oh yeah, well, I spend a lot of time on my phone, or I spend a lot of time doing this. And yes, those are idols that maybe stem from these lower G gods, but I need you to help them grab a hold of the little G gods. Don't simplify it so much that we just get the surface level. Dig in. And so I've given you 4. Others might arise, and be ready for that. But if you can take 2 of these 4, you can spend some time really fleshing these out, and maybe going to do a little bit more research on your own, and some particular ways you think teenagers struggle with this, it could go a long way. And so the first one I give you is legalism, probably the most common one. With going on 9 years of part and full-time student ministry, these by far are the ones that I have seen the most. And legalism within students, particularly students with a church background, is huge. And legalism is this idea, if I do good, God owes me. I've got to keep the legal system of God, and then God will owe me. This is the older brother in the prodigal God story, if you remember from our training. I've done what I'm supposed to. You, what are you doing? You owe me something, and you're giving it to him. The one who didn't do what he was supposed to. Students struggle with this. If I can just do my devotional consistent, if I can just pray consistently, if I can just not do those bad 3 sins and just keep to the straight and narrow, God will owe me. The problem is that's a misconstrued understanding of who God is. That's a little g God, and that's not good. And so we need to help them see that that's not big G God. That's a little G God that we are constructing our lives around. We're building our lives around. Then you have self-survival or self-perception. This is the idea of me, myself, and I. I'm my own lowercase g. I've got this. In order for me to survive, I've got to build this perception up around me. This will play, by the way, into next week when we have a one-off with all student ministry around the pressures of a teenager, as I am with parents, talking about the pressures of your teenager and how to walk with them well through that. Is some of those pressures are simply there because Satan seeks to steal, kill, and destroy, or they're just natural parts of what a teenager goes through. Such as all of a sudden they no longer see boys and girls having cooties, but now they're like, oh, I'm attracted to you and I want to be next to you, and for whatever reason I want to kiss you or touch you, or it's like, whoa, what just happened? That's a pressure of a teenager that they can't help. But then there's others here, the self-perception that I'm going to add on so that I can perceive something to be true that's really not, but it will help me survive in the long run. At least I think. And that becomes a little G God, because it's you who's your own God. It's essentially what Eve did in the garden. In order to survive here, I've got to know what he's hiding from me. And so I have to take this into my own hands and figure this out. And that becomes a little G God. Ultimately, this would be called pride. Mysticism. This one is, I would probably put this one at number 2. And this is what I feel is my lowercase G God. I can't tell you the number of times I hear this from students. What I feel, I didn't feel anything in that worship service, or I just don't feel him right now. And this is dangerous. When you turn to the Psalms, you better not be relying on feelings, because these psalmists were aching and breaking and empty and crying out, how long, O God? And so feelings can't be everything. The subjective part of our relationship with Christ is a significant piece. But many times the subjective part of our faith is built off the objective understanding of who God is and what he's done, and our affections are stirred, which is what leads into the fourth one, which is reason becomes their own little G God, because you can flip the coin and go hard to the other side, and the objective or the factual evidence only becomes my lowercase G God. If I have evidence that's convincing enough, that is factual, that I can know to be more true than this evidence, then I'll start building my life around this. And reason becomes a little G God. And this is particularly for those students who tend to land into an agnostic or an atheist grouping or category. They're really not agnostic or atheist. They couldn't tell you the backbones behind those belief systems, or more what I would call them as worldviews, but that tends to be what they feel like has more evidence or weight behind it. Science plays a huge part into this little G God, which is sad, because science actually in recent years has really helped in the understanding of God's existence. And so, those 4, it's in your email. I'd love for you to talk through those and talk about how they steal affections, because then we'll end the night talking about, or you as high schoolers digging into, what does devotion to God look like? We'll read through the Shema in Deuteronomy 6 and what God demands, the big G God demands. But some really good stuff this week. I don't want you to miss that. I don't want you to run past that. I've got about 30 seconds. I want to say one more thing to our high school leaders. Don't make the Bible study it for you. The paper I give you, I want you to follow the five P's in some way, form, or fashion, because we're carrying that on from Atlanta. We think it's a great tool for students to understand how to do it when you're not there. But let things happen. Let things unfold. Don't make it so structured that it's so tight. And so just some feedback I got is just be loose. And enjoy the hour of discussion. I love you guys. I hope this helps. Hope it's a great tool for you. We'll see you Wednesday.